After 9 years of building their flagship product from the ground up, my mentor, the man who hired me, championed me, called me the backbone of this company, handed my job to the 26-year-old son of our lead investor. He did it with a PowerPoint presentation and a bottle of champagne. I handed in my badge the next morning with a smile so calm it scared even me. When he read my resignation letter, the color drained out of his face. "You can't be serious," he said. I was absolutely serious. The announcement came on a Thursday afternoon in late October, the kind of gray Chicago day where the wind off the lake cuts right through you no matter how many layers you're wearing. I remember because I'd worn my good blazer, the charcoal one I saved for client meetings, thinking we were celebrating the Series B closing, $42 million. The number had been whispered through the office for weeks. We'd earned it. I personally managed 3 of the 5 anchor accounts that made the raise possible. Our CEO, Thomas, stood at the head of the conference table with a grin I'd seen him use on investors. Not the genuine one, the performed one, the one that meant he'd already made a decision and needed everyone else to feel good about it. "This is a pivotal moment for NovaBridge," he said, clicking to his first slide. "We're scaling fast, and that means evolving our leadership structure." I sat at the table between our head of design and our finance director. I'd been at NovaBridge for 9 years. I'd joined when we had 11 employees and a rented WeWork space in River North. I'd watched us grow to 214 people across 3 offices. I'd built the product operations team from myself and 1 part-time contractor into a department of 22. Thomas clicked to the next slide. "Effective immediately, I'm excited to announce that Colin Hargrove will be joining us as Vice President of Product Operations." The room went quiet for exactly 1 second before the polite applause started. I didn't clap, my hand stayed flat on the table. Colin Hargrove. I knew the name. His father, Warren Hargrove, had just led our Series B round through Hargrove Capital. Colin was 26. His LinkedIn showed 2 years at a consulting firm and 8 months at a startup that had folded. He had never shipped a product in his life. Thomas's eyes found mine across the table. I held his gaze and kept my expression completely still. "Amy has been an extraordinary contributor to where we are today," he continued, and there was the patronizing warmth right on cue. "She'll be moving into a senior advisory capacity, supporting Colin as he gets up to speed with our systems." Supporting Colin, getting him up to speed with my systems. The systems I had designed, built, documented, and defended in 4 consecutive board reviews. Our head of design, Priya, leaned slightly toward me. I felt her looking at my face. I didn't turn. After the meeting dispersed, I walked back to my desk the long way around, through the kitchen, because I needed 45 seconds alone before anyone could talk to me. I poured a cup of coffee I didn't want and stood at the window looking out at the L tracks. 9 years. My phone buzzed. A text from my husband Drew. "How'd it go? Big news?" I typed back, "Yeah, talk tonight." The rest of the afternoon I spent answering emails, reviewing a product sprint, and pretending I didn't notice the looks. Some people smiled too carefully. A few avoided eye contact entirely. Our head of engineering, James, stopped by my desk and said, "For what it's worth," and then seemed to think better of finishing the sentence and just squeezed my shoulder and walked away. Thomas appeared at my office door at 4:30, just as I was shutting down my second monitor. "Do you have a few minutes?" I gestured to the chair across from me. He settled into it and crossed one leg over the other. Thomas Whitfield had founded NovaBridge 11 years ago out of his apartment in Wicker Park. I had believed in him. That was the part that made this so specifically painful. I had genuinely believed in him, not just the company. "I know today was a lot," he started. I waited. "Colin is sharp. He's going to need someone with your institutional knowledge to help him find his footing. I'm thinking of this as a real opportunity for you to shape the next generation of leadership here." Shape the next generation. Train the man who took my job. Different words, same sentence. "Thomas," I said, 3 months ago in this office you told me the VP role was mine. Your exact words were, 'It's just a matter of timing.'" He shifted. The investor dynamic shifted when Warren came in. Colin's involvement was part of the term sheet negotiation. It's not a reflection of your performance. It's a reflection of something. You're indispensable here. That's exactly why this works. Colin needs you. I looked at this man I'd worked alongside for almost a decade. I'd been in the room when he cried after we almost ran out of runway in year 2. I'd covered for him during the product crisis of 2021 when he was dealing with his divorce. I believed, genuinely believed, that the relationship we had was built on something real. I need to get home, I said. Drew's making dinner. Of course. He stood, visibly relieved at the subject change. We'll talk more tomorrow. I really do value Amy. That hasn't changed. I nodded and picked up my bag. The drive home on the Kennedy was stop and go for 40 minutes. I sat in it and let myself feel the full weight of the thing, the humiliation of the applause I hadn't joined, the specific cruelty of being told to train my own replacement, the way Thomas had framed it as an opportunity, as though I should be grateful to be useful in a diminished capacity. Drew had made pasta. He took one look at me walking through the door of our Andersonville townhouse and pulled out a chair. Sit, talk. So I did. I told him everything. The slide deck, the champagne, the senior advisory capacity, the part where Thomas called it an opportunity. Drew's jaw tightened incrementally with each detail. By the time I got to Colin Hargrove's 8 months of startup experience, Drew had set down his fork and wasn't picking it back up. His father bought him the job. Essentially. And Thomas just, handed it over? After everything you've built? Warren Hargrove led the Series B. $42 million buys a lot of goodwill, apparently. Drew was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? I turned my wineglass slowly by the stem. I don't know yet, but I know I'm not training Colin Hargrove. The next morning, Colin arrived at 9:15 with a North Face vest and the energy of someone who had never once stayed at the office past 6. He had the kind of easy confidence that comes not from accomplishment, but from never having had a reason to doubt yourself. He stopped at my desk with a broad smile. Amy, I've heard so much about you. Thomas says you're basically the reason this place runs. Thomas is generous. I'd love to pick your brain this week, get a real download on how the ops side functions. Thomas says you're the only one who really understands the full architecture. The only one who understands it, because I built it. Let's find some time, I said, because I hadn't yet decided what I was going to do and I needed a few more days. Those days came faster and harder than I expected. The breaking point wasn't Colin himself. It was what I overheard 2 days later. Our office kitchen shared a thin wall with the small conference room Thomas used for one-on-ones. I was making tea at 11 in the morning when I heard voices. Thomas's low and even, and then Colin's higher, uncertain. Is she actually going to cooperate? Colin was saying. She seems kind of icy. Amy's a professional. She'll do what's right for the company. But she has to be angry. I'd be angry. Thomas made a sound that might have been a laugh. Amy's been here 9 years. She knows how this works. She's not a flight risk. She's too embedded. Where would she even go at this point? She's 41. She's specialized. She's built her whole identity around Novabridge. She'll stay. I stood with my mug in both hands and let those words land one at a time. Too embedded. Where would she even go? She'll stay. He wasn't reassuring Colin. He was calculating. He had decided, with the same analytical detachment he applied to product roadmaps, that I was trapped, that my years of dedication had become a cage, that I was too invested to leave and too professional to fight back, so he could do exactly what he'd done and suffer no consequences. I carried my tea back to my desk and sat down and didn't speak to anyone for the rest of the morning. That night, after Drew fell asleep, I opened my laptop at the kitchen table. I'd been thinking about it for 2 weeks, ever since Thomas first started hedging about the timing of the VP announcement, the way he'd gotten vague in a way he never used to get vague with me. Some part of me have known then. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I opened a blank document and typed, Dear Thomas, Please accept this letter as my formal notice of resignation from my position as head of product operations at Novabridge. My last day will be Friday, November 8th, providing the standard 2 weeks notice per my employment agreement. I'm grateful for 9 years of meaningful work and I wish the company continued success. Sincerely, Amy Caldwell. I read it 3 times. Then I printed it, signed it, and slid it into a plain white envelope. I went to bed and slept for 7 hours straight, which was 4 more than I'd been managing all week. The next morning, I wore my navy suit, the structured one with the wide lapels that always made me feel like I could walk into any room. I drove to the office, answered 2 emails, and at 9:45 walked to Thomas's office. His assistant Renata looked up. "Is he free for 5 minutes?" "Let me check." "Go ahead, actually. He just got off a call." Thomas was standing at his standing desk, scrolling through his phone. He looked up with a distracted half-smile. "Amy, what's up?" I placed the envelope on his desk without saying anything. He looked at it, then at me. "What's this?" "Open it." He did. He read it once quickly and then again more slowly, and I watched his face move through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, then the dawning understanding of what it meant, then something closer to alarm. "You're resigning?" "Yes." "Amy." He set the letter down. You can't do this right now. We're 3 weeks from the Q4 sprint kickoff. The Meridian account review is in 6 weeks. Colin doesn't know any of this yet." "I know." "So what, you just walking away? After 9 years?" I sat down in the chair across from his desk, which I don't think he expected, because it made clear I wasn't in a hurry and I wasn't going to be talked out of anything. "I heard you," I said. He went still. "In the kitchen, 2 days ago, through the wall. Every word." The silence that followed was a different quality than anything between us before. Not uncomfortable or searching. Just honest, maybe for the first time. "Amy, you told Colin I was too embedded to leave, that I'd built my whole identity around this place, that I had nowhere to go at 41. I kept my voice completely level. You weren't wrong about the first 2, but you were very wrong about the third." He opened his mouth. I stood up. "This isn't a negotiation. I'm not looking for a counteroffer or a new title. I want to do my 2 weeks professionally because there are people on my team who deserve a proper handoff and then I'm done. The Meridian account will be fine or it won't. That's not my problem anymore." I walked out past Renata, who was very studiously looking at her screen, and went back to my desk. My hands were steady. That surprised me. Word moves fast in a 200-person company. By noon, 3 people had appeared in my doorway with various expressions. James from engineering looked quietly satisfied. Our head of marketing looked stricken, and Priya hugged me for a full 10 seconds without saying anything. The 2 weeks that followed were the most professionally precise of my career. I documented everything. Every process, every client preference, every institutional quirk that lived only in my head. Not for Colin. For my team. For the 22 people who had built this department alongside me and who deserved to have their work protected regardless of what happened above them. Colin appeared twice during those 2 weeks. Once to ask about the Meridian account structure and once to ask about our sprint cadence. I answered both questions accurately and completely. I did not offer more than was asked. There's a difference between sabotage and simply not volunteering. On my last Friday, I cleared my desk, said goodbye to the people who mattered, and drove home through early November sleet. I had 3 weeks of savings runway and no plan, which should have been terrifying. It wasn't. The call came on a Wednesday morning in late November. I was at my kitchen table with coffee and my laptop, updating my portfolio case studies, when a number with a 312 area code appeared on my phone. "Amy Caldwell?" "Yes." "This is Sandra Osei from AeroPoint Systems. I hope this isn't a bad time. Your name came up in a conversation with David Chen. He suggested I reach out directly." I set down my mug. David Chen was the VP of Operations at Meridian Industries, my Meridian. The account I had personally managed for 6 years, through 2 contract renewals and 1 near-catastrophic service outage, that I personally driven a resolution for over a holiday weekend. That's very kind of him, I said. We're building out our product operations function. We're at an inflection point, about 60 people right now, and we need someone who can build the infrastructure to scale to 200. David said you're the best ops mind he's encountered in 20 years of vendor relationships. 20 years. David Chen had been in enterprise software since before I graduated college. I'd be very interested in hearing more, I said. AeroPoint was a supply chain intelligence company, 3 years old, well-funded, with a reputation in the industry for being ferociously merit-based. I'd heard the name. Sandra sent me a preliminary overview that afternoon, and the scope of the role made me sit back in my chair. VP of Product and Operations, full P&L responsibility, a direct report line to the CEO, stock options that vested over 4 years. The salary was 35% higher than what I'd been making at Novabridge. The interview process took 3 weeks and involved 6 conversations, including 2 with their board. Every single person I spoke with asked versions of the same question in different ways. How do you build a system that outlasts the person who built it? It was the right question. It was the question I'd spent 9 years answering at Novabridge, though no one there had ever thought to ask it. In my final interview, their CEO, a woman named Dr. Lynn Park, leaned across the table and said, "I'll be direct. We've talked to 7 people for this role. You're the only one who walked in with a point of view instead of a pitch." "I've been building too long to pitch," I said. She smiled. "That's exactly what I mean." The offer came the following Monday. I accepted on Tuesday. My first day at AeroPoint felt like stepping out of a building you'd been inside so long you'd forgotten what weather felt like. The office was in the West Loop, bright and open, and from my first meeting, I felt the specific relief of being in a room where people were listening to what I actually said, rather than performing acknowledgement of it. My direct report, a woman named Keiko who had been holding operations together in the interim, met me with a whiteboard full of process gaps and a list of questions she'd clearly been saving up for months. "I've been waiting for someone to actually talk to about the Fairlow account," she said, which made me like her immediately. Within 2 weeks, I had restructured our client onboarding process and cut average implementation time from 11 weeks to 7. Lynn asked me to present the new framework to the board at the next quarterly. I presented it, and they funded an additional headcount request on the spot. "Where did you develop this?" one of the board members asked after. 9 years of being told my process was fine and then quietly fixing it anyway, I said. He laughed. Lynn gave me a look that meant she'd be telling that story later. The industry is smaller than it seems. People talk. By my second month at AeroPoint, I'd heard through 2 different contacts that Novabridge was in trouble. The Meridian account had flagged concerns in November, 2 weeks after I left. By January, they'd formally put the contract under review. Colin, who had taken over the account with Thomas personally coaching him through it, had missed 2 scheduled check-ins and mishandled a billing dispute that I would have resolved in a single phone call. I heard this from David Chen directly, who called me in February, not to gloat just because he believed in transparency. "I want you to know," he said, "that the recommendation I gave AeroPoint about you is the best business call I've made in years." "Thank you, David. I'm sorry the transition was rough on your end." "The transition was rough because the wrong decision was made. That's not on you." 2 months later, I learned that Novabridge had lost the Meridian account entirely. Meridian represented roughly 22% of their annual recurring revenue. The Series B metrics that Warren Hargrove had funded against were suddenly underwater. I heard there had been layoffs, 15 people in the first round, more expected. I thought about James from engineering. I thought about Priya. I hoped they landed somewhere better. The hardest call was the one I got from our former sprint coordinator, a woman named Bettina, who had been at Novabridge for 6 years and had 2 kids in elementary school. "Amy, I don't even know if it's appropriate to call you," she started. "It's always appropriate. What's going on?" She told me about the layoffs, about the morale, about Colin trying and visibly failing, and Thomas starting to look like a man who understood he'd made a catastrophic error. Her voice was careful and tired. "I'm not asking you to fix it," she said. I don't know what to do. Can I give your resume to our recruiting coordinator at AeroPoint?" A pause. "We're hiring? We just got Series A funding and I'm building out the team. I can't promise anything, but I can make sure it gets the right attention." Bettina started at AeroPoint 6 weeks later as a senior operations coordinator. She cried a little on her first day, which she was embarrassed about, and I told her I'd done the same thing in the AeroPoint parking lot on my first morning, and she didn't have to be embarrassed at all. 6 months after I left Novabridge, Thomas called me. I saw his name on my phone on a Tuesday evening in May, sitting on our back porch with Drew and a glass of wine, and the particular exhausted contentment of someone who has worked hard at something that matters. I answered. "Thomas." "Amy." A pause. "You sound good." "I am good." Another pause. He wasn't practiced at this kind of call. Thomas Whitfield was excellent at pitching and terrible at apology, which is a common combination. "I've been thinking a lot about how things went," he said finally. "Okay. The Meridian situation and some of the other accounts, it's clarified some things for me about the decision I made and about how I communicated it to you." I waited. "I wonder if we could have a conversation about what a return might look like in a real capacity. The VP role, it's open now. Colin has moved into a different position, more investor relations focused." A careful pause. "It's the role you should have had." I looked at Drew across the porch table. He was reading something and had clearly decided not to appear to be listening, which meant he was absolutely listening. "Thomas," I said, "I appreciate you calling. But I'm not interested." A long silence. "Amy, we made a mistake. I made a mistake. I'm trying to correct it." "I know, and I genuinely hope you do, but I'm not the correction. The team misses you. The culture has." "Thomas." I kept my voice the same way I'd kept it in his office the morning I resigned. Calm, final, not unkind. "You told Colin I was too embedded to leave, that I had nowhere to go, that you could make the decision you made because I didn't have options." I paused. I just wanted to close the loop on that. He didn't have anything to say to that, so he said nothing. "Take care of yourself," I told him. "Take care of the people still there, and hire somebody who actually knows what they're doing." I hung up and sat for a moment with my phone in my lap. Drew set down his book. "How do you feel?" I thought about it honestly, like I finally finished something. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That night I put my phone away and didn't look at it again until morning. There was a Novabridge all-hands scheduled for that week. I knew because Bettina had mentioned it, and I had briefly wondered if I might feel something watching the company try to right itself without the foundation I'd spent a decade building. I didn't wonder that anymore. What I'd built at Novabridge still existed in every documented process, every client protocol, every framework that Keiko was now using at AeroPoint to do her job better. My work didn't belong to Thomas or to Novabridge or to the $42 million that had bought Colin Hargrove a title. It had always belonged to me. I just needed to leave to understand that. On my bookshelf at home, I kept one thing from my Novabridge years, a handwritten note from David Chen after we renewed the Meridian contract in 2022. "The best partnerships are built on trust, and trust is built by people like you." I kept it not as a reminder of where I'd been, but as evidence of what I'd always known about my own value. Evidence I'd spent too long waiting for someone else to confirm. I didn't need that confirmation anymore. That was the thing Thomas had miscalculated. Not that I had nowhere to go, but that I had finally stopped asking his permission to go there. The thing I keep coming back to is how certain Thomas was. Not arrogant, exactly. Just quietly, practically certain. He'd run the calculation and it had come out in his favor. Amy is too embedded. Amy has nowhere to go. Amy will stay. He said it through a thin wall to a 26-year-old who barely knew my name, and he said it the way you state a fact about weather, like it required no further thought. What he miscalculated wasn't my options. It was my integrity. I think about the 9 years I spent at Novabridge and I don't regret most of them. I learned things there I couldn't have learned anywhere else. How to build systems that outlast the people who design them. How to earn trust with clients over years of small kept promises. How to stay steady when everything around you is on fire. That knowledge was real. The work was real. What wasn't real was my assumption that the people above me were keeping the same score I was. That's the thing no one warns you about when you're good at your job and you love what you're building. You start to believe that your results speak loudly enough that the politics don't matter. You keep your head down and you deliver, and you tell yourself that competence is its own protection. I told myself that for 9 years. I was wrong, and the proof of it arrived in a PowerPoint presentation with a bottle of champagne. But here's what I've come to understand. Sitting on the other side of it, Thomas's decision didn't reveal a flaw in me. It revealed a limit in him. He confused loyalty with dependency. He looked at someone who had never once let him down and concluded she never would. Not because she was strong, but because she was stuck. That's a failure of judgment, and failures of judgment have a way of collecting interest. When the Meridian account walked, it wasn't punishment from some external force keeping score. It was simply the natural outcome of replacing expertise with proximity. Colin didn't lose that account because the universe intervened. He lost it because he didn't know what he was doing, and the gap between what clients need and what he could provide was too wide to paper over with enthusiasm. Consequences don't require cosmic intervention. They just require time. What I'm most grateful for in the end is that I didn't stay. Not because leaving was brave, though it was a little, but because staying would have slowly eaten something in me that I can't name but would have missed. The part that knows its own value. The part that refuses to perform gratitude for being underestimated. I kept my professionalism through every day of those 2 weeks, documented everything cleanly, treated my team with the same care I always had. That mattered to me. Not because Thomas deserved it, but because I did. Keiko asked me once, in our first month at AeroPoint, how I stayed so calm during difficult client calls. I told her I'd spent years learning to separate what I could control from what I couldn't, and to focus every bit of energy on the former. She wrote it down, which made me laugh. That's the whole thing, really. You build your skills with honesty, in the open, over years. You hold yourself to a standard even when no one's watching, especially when no one's watching. And when the moment comes that asks you to choose between your comfort and your self-respect, you don't hesitate. Not because the choice is easy, because you've already made it 1,000 small times before, in all the quiet, ordinary days that nobody noticed. I didn't need Thomas to confirm what I was worth. I just needed long enough to stop asking him to.